Alright, so we have since shifted indoors since the weather outside is not very good. We got these running off the 12 volts to the extent. These are the extended 12 volts that I was running to my factory connector. That's a JZ connector. So these are the 12 volts that originally ran to the coils and the injectors factory. They still supply plenty of voltage. So what I've done is I've separated them. I've split 4 wires off each one. Each wire is going to house 3 injectors, and then the extra wire on one is an alternator. It's for the regulator. It's going to turn on the regulator, and then the extra wire on the other one is for the VVTI. So this one is fairly easy to explain away. I didn't have to really record all this, only because it's kind of a simple process. So yeah, those there are good to go. And then as for my grounds, I have my grounds running here all together. Like I was explaining in the video, this is a sensor ground, so they are just supposed to be on a ground that is noiseless, and they will work fine if you ground them to the actual engine. Just like a factory JZ, the grounds on the actual manifold are actually all to the sensors on the engine, and that does work. This just works better in my opinion. And then also we have the 5 volt that's separated. One of them is going to go to the TPS. The other 2 are actually just going to go to 150 psi sensors for the fuel and then for the oil. So this is fairly easy to explain away. Everything's all cut to length. Everything is here. This blue wire is actually the dash coolant temp. That's going to be right next to the actual ECU coolant temp. So this is going to run in line, and then I will have a Deutz connector on the inside of the car. This is going to run up and in line with the actual coolant temp. So fairly easy, fairly simple. Yeah. Next in the process is actually sleeving this, and I know this is one of the things that everybody wanted to see, so that's what we're going to be doing now. Alright, so one more thing. I went and bought something else right after I throw it and break it. I now have an EMU Black with a logger. So the 240's been needing an upgrade for a minute now. So this thing is pretty old. It does the job though. It's a wonderful, wonderful ECU. But we will be repinning these to this. It's going to be the same situation. I'll probably just do it on my own time. But basically everything is going to be parallel to all these videos. So when this changes, you guys see this change later on or whatever, do not be alarmed. Do not worry. That's just because I'm repinning it. So these pins are going to be the same as these. It's going to be basically like this connector might actually just be the same as this one. I'll have to look. Before you start putting connectors on, it's very important that you put your sleeving on first. This also really depends on what sleeving you're using. I have long since ditched the sleeving that is split, and I go with the traditional, I like to call it, it's like a caterpillar style. So you kind of, if you squish it, it gets larger and allows for a much bigger amount of wiring to fit through it. Since this is what I'm going to be using as the main loom, it's going to be a little bit smaller than some larger sections that I have. So I have a few different sizes here. This is for a much larger harness, and this is going to be a little bit smaller, but it's going to be able to open up enough to fit my actual harness in there. About right here is where the loom is going to begin. So this is where all the union is. Really, we want the flying lead to begin at the start of the actual individual wires. So about right here is like right behind the cylinder head, and then all of this is going to be just coming out and going to their places. So where we want to run this is going to be down to the harness, down there inside the engine bay, or it'll be up inside the cabin, and then up to basically the beginning of the wiring that's going to start. Rather important that we want to make sure that this is long enough to reach all the way out here, but you also need to take in consideration that whenever you fit the harness in there, it's going to get bigger. So when it's bigger, it's actually going to get shorter. So you're going to want to get more on there than you think. See that? So this is expanded to its maximum, but if I let it go, it obviously gets a lot longer. Alright, so I'm taking a quick guess at this. I got a length here that will go inside the cabin, basically to the beginning of the harness, and then out into the rest of the harness. Alright, so there we are. Got this guy all the way up in here, and then my shielding right here is just about perfect. So there's the beginning of the harness. Flying lead, very simple setup. Alright, so now that we have the shielding on here, make sure everything's nice and pulled tight. Make sure everything is pulled out of the shielding here. Make sure it's all pulled nicely. So you're gonna have the base of your harness down here. Everything's gonna be set down here on the ECU, but then the actual harness side, the flying lead's gonna start inside here. Ideally, you're gonna want to put some heat shrink up onto the shielding first. You're gonna have one at the base, and then you're gonna have one at the front. You're not gonna use it yet. It's just gonna be on there for later on. Once you start getting all the rest of these shielded, it's gonna be really, really large, and you're not gonna be able to put this on anymore. So you're trying to do this one step at a time. First it's this, and then it's the smaller ones. Okay, put that one in the front at the ECU, and then I like to put a larger one on the engine side because it's going to have a lot of stuff in it. Alright, so this is a much easier to slide everything through. Slide this guy all the way down, and then later on, when it's all said and done, you'll put that on. And turns out I forgot this wire, so now I'm gonna have to feed this through. And so here is, if you forgot a wire, all you have to do is shrink this guy all the way down, and you can fish your wire through nice and easy. And then you can actually hold it, and then just fish this guy over the top until you find it. Just like this. So you see how this piece of shielding got super tiny. And so now we have the other section of the harness for the dash coolant temp. I'm gonna run it through here like it's supposed to be at the top. This heat shrink it'll go down to a third of its size, so it's pretty good. Alright, I gotta fish this back through the heat shrink. And then thankfully, all the wires that we have that are supposed to be on the harness are now inside the shielding. So really we're on the home stretch. So I like to just take these guys and just set them down into the middle, because this is what you will pull these back. You'll pull the shielding back, and each one of these, any of the pairs or sections that you're going to be using due to connectors is going to have its own small little shielding, and it's going to slide down pretty far down into the harness. Then this is going to slide over the top of it, and then you're going to heat shrink it all down, and so all that shielding is going to be down in here, so it can't come out. That's essentially the final picture, is what we're looking at. We got to start separating wires and figuring out exactly what we want to go where, what we want to be paired up. And so here we can start with this guy. This is my starter. Remember to always burn the end of your shielding so that way it doesn't fray. Okay, so this I didn't get a new connector for, and it's got the factory pin on there. But this shielding that I have is much big enough for this to go through, just like this. And so this is going to be the first example of this. We're going to run this all the way through, which is kind of annoying because the pin itself is large and spiky. It's pointy, so it likes to grab the material. And then another thing is you don't need heat shrink on this side. Once it gets down in here, this main heat shrink point is going to heat shrink everything here. So you will only need one piece of heat shrink on the ends next to the connectors, because that is where you don't want the wiring pulling out and stuff. You want all the protection to be at the connector. Doubles as a look good item. So really you're gonna go pair by pair, threes by threes, whatever you're doing for your connectors, and you're going to bunch each set of wires into its own shielding, and then you'll eventually have yourself a flying lead. Alright, so I'm going to snip the end of this. And we're going to burn it. Then we're going to slide it all the way down. And you can see down here on the beginning, this shielding is going to slide all the way down. And then this main shielding will slide over the top of it, just like this. And so now you've got this lead coming out of here, and so this will come over the top just like this. And this is what it will look like. Basically the whole harness will look just like this. And you can kind of imagine there's like 7 of these coming out of here from this, and it looks very, very nice. So that is the end goal. That is the end goal. You don't have to worry about in here. Once you burn these, it's not going to fray. It's going to be tucked up inside here, and it's going to be shrinked with this. Very simple process. Okay, and then on this end, we'll find a piece of heat shrink that I can fit over this connector. Don't want to use this red one. Or maybe I do, because then I can just say that's the starter. Actually, you know what? There's nothing wrong with this. I'll use this, and it'll be for the starter. But this will be the only one I use that's red. Typically, I will do black, but the red, it'll be fine. It'll be fine.